Good morning. I'm Tomek Niewiadomski, and joining me today is the Moto Morini X-Cape 700. This is a motorcycle that, to my surprise, has become extremely popular and in high demand. There are a lot of inquiries about this bike, and people genuinely want to test it out. To my surprise, not because I didn't like this bike, but because there's one thing that puzzles me. Generally, this is a motorcycle of the adventure class, but to me, it feels more like a crossover because, the suspension is only slightly raised. There's a 19-inch front wheel. The off-road capabilities of this motorcycle are modest, which I'll also mention when I talk about the riding experience. The engine specs are also, in theory, nothing surprising because we have 70 horsepower, 68 Newton meters, and it's an engine very closely related to what was in the Kawasaki ER6N. However, here it's a bored out unit to nearly 700 cubic centimeters. Of course, it's not a identical twin, but rather an engine based on Kawasaki. So there's nothing particularly unique here either. There are no technological frills either, because when it comes to electronics, all we have here is ABS, which works together with the system. The ABS is from Bosch, the braking system is from Brembo. So again, nothing surprising, but definitely something solid. Similarly, there's nothing surprising, but still solid about the Marzocchi suspension in the front. In the back, if I remember correctly, it's probably a simpler Kayaba. However, I wouldn't bet my life on it. There's no emblem on this shock absorber, at least none that I could spot. So at least visually, it might be somewhat borrowed from Kayaba. The suspension is adjustable at the front. You can adjust the spring preload, rebound, and compression. So once again, it's decent, but nothing fancy. So maybe there are some interesting technological features when it comes to gadgets. No, there aren't. There's a camera, and cameras are pretty common these days, especially on Chinese motorcycles. A tablet, yes, there is one. Apple CarPlay or Android Auto, no, it doesn't have those. So overall, as you can see for yourselves, this motorcycle doesn't look boring, but on the other hand, it doesn't look particularly flashy either. It's decent in every respect, but in no way does it stand out. So it makes me wonder, I'm curious where such huge popularity comes from. Because initially I heard about this popularity from the importer. When I tried to schedule a test ride for this motorcycle, it was really hard to find a slot in the calendar because this bike is constantly out on the road, even though there are only 2 or 3 test units in the Polish press fleet. But I actually checked on Facebook, in groups, and so on. Everyone is talking about this motorcycle, everyone is asking about it, so it's quite intriguing. However, I have one theory that might explain, at least a little, where such great interest in this motorcycle comes from. Because as I said earlier, it's not that there's something wrong with this motorcycle. I'm just curious why a motorcycle that doesn't really stand out in any particular way in terms of its capabilities or specifications is attracting so much attention. Because generally this is the same category as the Suzuki V-Strom, Kawasaki Versys 650, Yamaha Tracer 700, Benelli TRK 702, or the Vogue DSX 650, if I remember the name correctly. Roughly speaking, it's that segment of motorcycles. A segment that's packed to the brim with motorcycles that are similar in terms of performance, similar in terms of specifications, but not necessarily similar in terms of price. Because when it comes to the Japanese competition, it's on average about 10,000 more expensive than the Moto Morini X-Cape 700, since the Moto Morini starts at 33,900. And that's one of the things that I think generates so much interest, because let's round it up to 34 grand. You get a motorcycle that isn't just a tiny A2 bike anymore. I mean, for a tall person, I'm 1 meter 83 centimeters tall and I have plenty of space here. Generally, the riding position is set up so that when you get on this motorcycle, you sink into it and feel that your arms are stretched out more. Actually, I'll get on so you can see for yourselves. You feel that your arms are stretched out a bit more. There's still plenty of room for your legs. They're not particularly cramped or bent. It's not a chopper style position where your legs are completely straight, but it's comfortable. Your legs rest in a natural way. When you put your hands on the handlebars, your arms are positioned naturally as well. Your back is straight too, so the riding position is really nice. The size of this motorcycle isn't particularly intimidating, but it's not small either. So maybe this balance is the key to its popularity, especially since it's not especially heavy, but not particularly light either. 213 kilograms of curb weight under this mysterious term is probably referring to the dry weight. The substantial tank holds precisely 18 liters, so when it's completely filled to the very brim, it will undoubtedly weigh around 230 kilograms. So you can clearly see in every single respect, it's absolutely just right. It's not too much in this particular way or that particular way. Right in the middle. But then there's the price. The price is very attractive. What's also attractive is how this motorcycle has been made, because really in every aspect, no matter where you look, the only thing, and if something like this catches your eye, it means the rest must really be in order. The bolt on the steering head. The nut is ugly, and that's the only thing I managed to find fault with. You know, that kind of crude Chinese one, because right now, Moto Morini is Chinese. There's even a proud sticker on the frame here. Mejang Bito Morini Jehagel, because the Chinese, since they have production but no brands, have recently taken a liking to buying up Italian brands. Because unfortunately, Moto Morini went bankrupt in 2010. Unfortunately, just like many other Italian brands, generally speaking, it's a shame really, because they had some interesting motorcycles, although it's a case similar to Benelli. Interesting. But there was no service network, no spare parts sales network, and even the reliability was somewhat questionable. So Moto Morini is having a new beginning, and this new beginning comes in the form of touring motorcycles, not sport bikes or power nakeds like before. And coming back to it, 34 grand. A very well-made motorcycle. Everything looks very neat, and above all, it really does look good. I can't really tell you whether I like this motorcycle or not. I won't say it's ugly, I won't say it's beautiful, but it's definitely interesting for this segment because it looks different. It doesn't look like every other motorcycle in this category. Look, the lines here are drawn in a much sharper, more dynamic way. It looks really cool in photos when Mikao and I were taking pictures for the magazine. If you're riding through a turn and leaning a bit, it's as if you're parallel to that line of the motorcycle. It looks quite interesting, you have to admit. The design of this motorcycle is nicely done. Those full LED front lights also make a big impression. And I think that overall, drop by drop, little by little, it all adds up to make this motorcycle genuinely intriguing. And once it catches your interest, what kind of impression does it make? Does that curiosity fade away or not? Overall, I can't say that this motorcycle has disappointed me in any way. Just as I expected from looking at it, it delivers exactly what you would anticipate. It's comfortable. As I mentioned, the riding position is great. It's really relaxed. You can ride for a long time. The seat, here I recommend taking a test ride, because while it's theoretically soft, it has a shape that might not suit everyone. Personally, if this were my motorcycle, I think I would shape the seat a bit differently, because it kept pulling me forward, which, gentlemen, you probably know what I mean. I felt discomfort in the place where I least expect to feel discomfort. When it comes to riding, it's a bit of a mixed bag. When I picked up this motorcycle, I actually recorded a reel for my Instagram, because honestly, when I was picking it up, I knew absolutely nothing about it, and I didn't even want to find out. I mean, I didn't know how much it cost, I didn't know how much power it had, and so on. I knew that this motorcycle existed, I knew it was a 700, but I didn't know where the engine came from or anything like that. It was only later that I started to dig into it and did a little test of my own spider sense. Would I be able to guess, after the first 15 or 20 kilometers, what kind of specs this motorcycle has? And I said there that it has 40 Newton meters of torque. Okay, maybe I underestimated it a bit, but you definitely don't feel those 68 Newton meters. You don't feel it because this engine is only average at low revs. Just like that. I mean, it goes, it moves, it just gets you from place to place. There's this boo sound, and at 4,000 you feel like another little hamster has started spinning the crank, and only from 6,000 onwards. But it's more like, you know, just a little click, and only from 6,000 does the engine really start to come alive. And what's interesting is that even though it likes higher revs, medium and high, it doesn't really vibrate much, because vibrations only really show up in one range. Between 5 and 6,000 RPM, and those are the only vibrations you get from this engine. On the other hand, the auditory impressions, the sound, are pretty average. But you have to admit, once you rev it above 6,000, this motorcycle really goes nicely. Even though it's closely related to the Kawasaki Versys 650, you don't really feel the Kawasaki character in this engine. It's much more just Moto Morini X-Cape 700. I wouldn't look for Kawasaki's characteristics here. The Kawasaki was smoother, it pulls better from low revs, but it doesn't have the transition between low and mid to high revs. The character is completely different here. I don't know if it's better or worse. Everyone would have to try for themselves whether this difference in character is worth 10,000. Despite its close ties to Kawasaki, the gearbox doesn't really work like those in Japanese motorcycles. It's quite stiff. The gears engage in a rather rough way. However, there's nothing like gears slipping out or hitting a false neutral. It shifts precisely, but with firmness. You have to give it that. It doesn't really like quick, very dynamic gear changes. However, each of the 6 gears is well matched. The first 3 gears are just right for city riding. In 6th gear, the revs are relatively low, pleasant, and comfortable for cruising speeds. However, in the city, you don't have to constantly shift gears, even though the low end isn't particularly powerful. Apart from the fact that the gearbox operates a bit roughly, it's actually pleasant and decent. Everything here is also nicely put together. I mean, I suspect it won't be so nice when it comes to servicing, but everything looks very neat. Another cool thing is that you get a center stand as standard. Overall, even though this motorcycle is simple, it actually comes quite well equipped as standard. There's a center stand, there are tire pressure sensors, and there's a camera that serves as a dash cam. However, I think you need to connect to an app for that. Honestly, I didn't connect to it myself, because how could I possibly connect to every motorcycle? I don't know, all these apps in Chinese motorcycles seem to demand full access to your phone. I'm really not keen on doing that. As for the suspension, besides the fact that it's Marzocchi, there's one more thing to say. It really performs with quality. The initial travel is fairly smooth, and overall the suspension isn't so much stiff as it is tight and well composed. The initial travel isn't overly soft, but it absorbs bumps like manholes and potholes really well. But from about halfway through its range, it becomes nicely firm and provides strong damping. So if you hit a bigger hole, it's not a problem either. Interestingly, there are tire pressure sensors, but that's just a side note. But coming back to the suspension, it really keeps this motorcycle in check. The rear suspension isn't overly soft either. That's what I like about this motorcycle, because it really feels tight and responsive under your control. It obeys your commands. And what's cool about this engine, that up to speeds of 150, 160 kilometers per hour, it cruises along effortlessly without straining and without running at super high revs. These are comfortable cruising speeds, although of course the fuel consumption does go up a bit then, but around 140 is really a comfortable cruising speed on this motorcycle, where you know you still have 20, 30, 40 kilometers per hour of comfortable reserve, and you don't have to push the bike hard. And at these speeds, when you're riding this machine, it's also nice that you're decently shielded from the wind. That's thanks to either the low or the high windscreen. You can adjust it yourself after all. The adjustment is super easy. Theoretically, it's stepless, but setting it, for example, in the middle while riding is practically impossible. So let's just say that in practice it's 2-stage, because you have the lowest and the highest positions. The wind protection is decent then. It's not extravagant, but it's really decent. There's nothing to complain about. My helmet doesn't get buffeted. I don't feel excessive pressure on my shoulders here, so it's good. What's not good, however, is that this windshield is like this. You know how it is with the Chinese when they make a windshield? It's not exactly clear. It distorts the view a bit in some areas. In my opinion, that's a downside, because a good windshield isn't expensive these days. And if we have a motorcycle that's practically well made in every respect, the coatings are nice, the finishes are nice, the welds look neat, the plastics look neat. Even Moto Morini, a renowned motorcycle manufacturer, meticulously took care of even the smallest details, like the brand's truly characteristic double M symbol being prominently placed on the durable foot peg rubbers, showcasing their attention to design and quality. They thought of that, but they didn't think to make a good windshield. So here it's just average. However, one thing also has to be admitted. Because Moto Morini is already a somewhat established brand, accessories for these motorcycles appear more quickly. It's not like with a brand that's starting from scratch with its recognition and name, where accessory parts show up with a big significant delay. From what I've seen, both Givi and Shed have racks for top cases or some luggage systems available here. In general, there are some luggage accessories. I might be mistaken, so if anything, I'll correct it here. I also saw a windscreen. I don't remember which brand, but it was from one of the reputable ones, either Puig or Givi, so that's nice as well. And once we've picked up speed, it's a good idea to brake. And as I mentioned earlier, braking is handled by Brembo combined with Bosch ABS. What's interesting is that here, the Chinese and Italians, let's call them a collective, didn't follow the path of most other Chinese manufacturers who put on calipers that are visible, like branded Nissin or Brembo calipers, because those are noticeable, but then use some no-name master cylinder number. Here they've also installed a Brembo master cylinder. The lever is nice because it's adjustable. It's not some fancy radial master cylinder or anything like that. Just a simple basic master cylinder, but it's Brembo. And does it work like a Brembo? Number. A simple answer to a simple question. It doesn't work like a Brembo. I don't know what's going on here. There's a steel braided line here. There are calipers that I know well. There's a master cylinder that I can say I know well. I haven't seen it in a long time, but you could say I know it well, and it doesn't work like a Brembo. I mean, something here, something just didn't work out. It's not that the braking force is weak. It's not that the brakes feel is weak, because that's all fine. However, there's this initial part of the brake levers movement where absolutely nothing happens at all. And this particular section of travel is often referred to as the free play or dead zone. It's as if there's a dead play there, a dead movement. And the adjustment that's used here on the lever doesn't help. It's just that you press, nothing happens, and then at a certain point it just engages and the brake starts to bite, right? You know, and on the one hand, there is absolutely nothing inherently dangerous here. Like, for example, a weak braking force or anything remotely similar to that, but it undeniably does add an unnecessary and unwanted tension to the overall ride experience. I really don't like that. It's Brembo and all that, but it doesn't work like Brembo. You might as well have a much cheaper J1 here, which would work better, although Brembo can work well too. Brembo can work amazingly, but something just didn't click here. I don't really know what went wrong here. Just like something didn't quite work out here with the choice of tires, because Lotorini used Pirelli Scorpion Trail STR here. Generally, I like these tires for their versatility, universality, and the way they guide off-road beginners, or not even beginners, but those just getting acquainted with off-roading or adventure touring by the hand. Come on, let us show you what you can do off-road. However, the motorcycle itself won't show you what you can do off-road, because what's Heraya Meadow and so on is pretty much the limit of what this bike can handle. The suspension travel of 175 millimeters just doesn't allow for more than that. The ground clearance of 190 millimeters doesn't allow for it either. Besides, ground clearance is one thing, but the fact that the frame is just a standard open backbone frame means the engine isn't protected in any way, and underneath there's only the catalytic converter. So even if you bottom out somewhere or hit a root or a log while riding off-road, the catalytic converter takes the hit right away. So in terms of off-road capability, this motorcycle, it's not even average, it's simply not an off-road bike. Let's just accept the fact that not every motorcycle with slightly raised suspension and quasi-knobby tires is an off-road bike. I know that there have been tests published in the media somewhere claiming that the older version, the X-Cape 650, is a motorcycle for everything. Well, this is simply an evolution of that 650. But no, this motorcycle just isn't suitable for off-road riding. If on your way home from work you have a route that goes through some meadows where you just putter along, puttering just to look around, relax and soak in the greenery, that's fine. But no, this motorcycle simply isn't made for off-road, plain and simple. That's it. It's not a flaw. You just don't have to ride every motorcycle off-road. If you want to buy a motorcycle to have fun off-road, to ride some test route and really enjoy yourself, then sure, it might get through the terrain 10 out of 10, but you won't have any fun doing it. It's not enjoyable, even though the manufacturer cleverly added this seat extension here. It looks cool, and it's supposed to be a grip for your legs, and sure, it's a bit easier and more comfortable to hold on with your legs because of it, but no. Let's just forget about off-roading with this motorcycle. This is a motorcycle for touring. This is a motorcycle for everyday use, and in both of these roles it works great because it's agile, it leans into corners exactly the way you want it to. Maybe it doesn't have a distinct personality or charisma when it comes to handling, because the handling is very neutral. You enter a corner, it responds to you, you straighten it out, you go into the next corner gently. You just feel that the front is a little higher, so it takes a wider line. And that's the only real characteristic of its handling. Otherwise, it's extremely neutral. This is a motorcycle that's like a blank slate, where you're just starting to discover yourself and you don't expect the bike to have some strong, distinctive character. And that's exactly what works in the case of the X-Cape 700. It turns easily, and above all, it's stable. When cornering, it's really tailored to the needs of both male and female riders. Maybe not so much for beginners, but for those who are more laid back, not expecting sporty thrills, not looking for that kind of, like you get with some other Italian bikes. I'm talking about Ducati, or Austrian ones like KTM, where you have that distinctive handling, where the bike kind of dances a bit, there's a bit of a thrill, and the motorcycle feels alive. Number, it just goes straight from left to right, like it's on rails. It's the same in the city, filtering through traffic jams and so on. Okay, the handlebars are a bit wide, plus the handguards. That does make it feel a bit bulkier in terms of width, but it's still easy to maneuver this motorcycle between cars. It's just that this is a motorcycle. Like I said, a blank slate. It doesn't stand out in any way, neither negatively nor positively. It might stand out to some people in terms of looks, because it really does look more interesting than many of its competitors. It stands out a little compared to other Chinese motorcycles in terms of finish, because it really is quite refined for this price range, I emphasize. You really have to admit it's an incredibly nice and truly pleasant place here, and if it ultimately proves to be consistently reliable, it will simply be a very solid, exceptionally secure and remarkably safe means to effectively carry out all of your extensive touring and travel plans. Mostly for continental or domestic plans. I don't know how it would perform for longer trips, but for local tours like weekend getaways, heading out to a lake or a river, packing a tent or something will work really well and be very enjoyable. Like I said, if you're expecting a motorcycle with a distinct character, something that really stands out, then no, this isn't something that should interest you. And to be honest, I'm not even suggesting you check out this motorcycle because, as I mentioned, it doesn't stand out in any way, neither negatively nor positively. And motorcycles like this are needed too. This is a truly simple, remarkably safe, incredibly pleasant, and exceptionally good-looking touring motorcycle that genuinely won't break the bank, and yet it will still add a vibrant bit of color and excitement to your motorcycle passion while always remaining incredibly safe and secure for you. It will also gently guide you by the hand if you're a complete beginner, offering a smooth and reassuring introduction to the world of motorcycling. If you already have a bit of riding experience, you'll definitely be satisfied too. That is, as long as you're not looking for some super intense thrills. And that's probably about it when it comes to this motorcycle, because as I mentioned, if a motorcycle doesn't stand out, how much can you really say about it? Although I've probably already been talking about it for too long anyway. In the meantime, thank you very much for your attention. Let me know what you think about this bike and what, in your opinion, makes it so popular, even though, as I mentioned, it's not exceptional in any way. Thanks a lot for watching. Take care. See you.